This video is on the true will, and it's for you if you are an aspirant, which means somebody who is intending to raise your energy, if you want to look at it that way, to become increasingly in alignment with the universal will, to climb the tree of life. There are many ways to put it. So, or if you may wish to do so, later in this lifetime or in another incarnation, this video is for you. I'd like to begin with a quote from Christopher Reed Johnson, the inner head of the Order of Grady McMurtry's AA. This is from the Introduction to the Joy of Dissolution. He writes, "The great work consists of knowing silence. The word is found in silence, which is the attainment of understanding, Binna. Inevitably, it is upon this blank slate that a first word is again written." My name is Erica Johnson. I'm the Prime Ministratrix for the Order. That's to say, I'm the teacher for the lever grade and below. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. I'm going to do a video on the true will, and it'll be in conversation with an article by J. Edward Cornelius that refers to the birth chart, but this is not an astrology video. This article is titled "On the Wheel of Fortune and Our Birth Chart." I won't be talking about the chart part of it so much. And it occurs on page 120 of Essays number 1. The Wheel of Fortune I will talk about, and that is, of course, a reference to the Crowley-Harris card, Wheel of Fortune, corresponding to the Hebrew letter Kaf, K-A-P-H in English. And it basically talks about the three Gunas. So there are three figures shown around the rim of the Wheel of Fortune, and those are Sphinx, Hermanubis, and Typhon. And those corresponds to the three tendencies or Gunas. And I will refer to those in this. So we're talking about essentially the three grades of Thelema and how that talks about the true will and how to manifest that in your life. Jerry makes the point in his article that although the three gods or figures are demonstrated around the rim of the wheel in that card, that's for convenience. In other words, it's hard to stuff them in the middle where they should be. And the reason they should be in the middle, he says, is that the middle point or the hub of the wheel is that around which the outer part turns. So we're talking about the true will being the rim and the wants being on the outside of the wheel. So if you hang around sort of focusing on the outside, you can chase forever what you want and manage to completely avoid doing your will. I want to remind you of a principle that he brings up, but Crowley also brings this up in Magic and Theory and Practice in the introduction. So the way Crowley puts it is that if you do your will, if you do your true will, you always have the inertia of the universe behind you. And Jerry in this article explains why that is. And it is that when you came into incarnation, you essentially chose an intent or a function. So there's some function that you can do for the world, for the humanity, for all beings, that nobody else can do. And that's what this incarnation is for. However, if you decide to do something else, or you just get distracted, or you don't have sufficient wisdom, then you can easily not provide the foundation for the will or the chalice for the will to manifest through your life. So in that case, here's what happens, he says. Whatever you picked, whatever you chose when you came into incarnation is going to manifest. It's going to try. It's going to unconsciously manifest. So then when you do things that are at odds with your true will, you basically, it's like crossing your own wake or something. If you're riding in a motorboat, you're going to hit choppy waters. You're going to have problems. You're going to have conflict. And so that is the reason to, if you need a reason, that is the reason to try to discern your will and live in accordance with it, while at the same time still managing to embrace your wants, embrace the sensual nature that you have, essentially marrying heaven and earth. So when Jerry is talking about the Wheel of Fortune, he tells a story of the three figures on the rim of the wheel, which again should be in the center of the wheel, and how they correspond to the three grades and three forms of energy known as the Gunas. And I'll discuss each of those, read a little bit of what he says, a sentence from each of those, and then my own comment on that. And then this is giving us the secret for how to rectify the outer and the inner, how to align your playground, the world, the things that you enjoy, your wants, with your true will that you selected coming here, which is going to inevitably try to manifest. And so then you either have the choice of resisting it and creating havoc or aligning. And so this tells about how to align, so that you can enjoy the things of the earth, but at the same time do the work of the highest. So let me start with his description of the Sphinx, which is the first figure. The three figures around the rim of the Wheel of Fortune correlate to three coils of the Serpent Kundalini, or the three Gunas. Again, another way to put the same thing. So the Kundalini, as you probably know, is this powerful manifesting force, this energy that essentially vivifies the entire universe. There's a tendency in a lot of Western literature to talk about it in terms of something that you have, because they say, oh, it's your sexuality, it originates at the base of your spine. But more accurately, it's universal. It's something that's utterly universal. There's one Kundalini everywhere, and it enters your body at the base of the spine. It's what makes you alive. It's constantly raising and lowering, and then in the vertical work, such as the AA, we are attempting to take some measure of control of that process. Control is probably too strong a word, but to manage to be able to focus that energy into different spheres progressively as we're safely able to do so. So the Kundalini force has three coils, three gunas or levels. The highest one is the first one that Jerry discusses in his article. The highest coil of the serpent, he says, refers to a neutral quality known as Sattva, or purity, and literally implies existence. So just bare existence. Its sacred color is white. And he goes on to say, a person who is known as a Sattvika individual, like the sun itself, is a spiritual person who has the desire to work unselfishly toward the welfare and growth of humanity by giving their light freely into the world. This is the Sphinx. It rules Sulfur. This also refers to the path of the Hermit. It holds the mysteries in the name of the secret master, the Book of the Law. So here we're talking about the highest grade of the three grades mentioned in the Book of the Law. The three grades are the Hermit, the Lover, and the Man of Earth. This is the highest one. And on the Tree of Life, it corresponds to the top three spheres. So a Hermit is someone who has successfully crossed the abyss. Now, most people don't attempt that. Most people should not attempt that in this lifetime. But as Thelemites, we know that this is not all there is. So we're constantly coming into existence. We're creating foundation. It's much better to create a solid foundation and make this a safe process rather than destroying our chakric system and then possibly having to spend, several incarnations in hell again or something like that, so to speak. I don't mean a place. I mean the state of being at odds with one's will, being excessively egotistical and confused and prey to one's illusions. Rather than doing that, it's better to take your time. So I guess what I'm saying is, don't be afraid to take whatever time you need. There's no rush. There is no timeline for the process of aspiring upward along the tree. But in any case, it's still nice to know where you're going. So this description that Jerry offers of the Sattvika individual tells us that that highest neutral principle corresponding to sulfur is something that is completely unselfish, completely dedicated to humanity. You've poured every drop of your blood into the chalice, and you're literally giving everything for all. And that's why in the vision, the voice, or the description of those hermits that Crowley gives, or that he channels, is of just piles of dust in the city of pyramids. Piles of dust. There's nothing left of the ego. There's nothing left of the one who puts their wants above the will. The second coil, or middle tendency, guna, is known as rajas. Now here I'm reading from Jerry again, which is a positive, fiery, or active force. Its sacred color is red. It details the foundation of our outer life as we want it to be. It rules the moon sign, so it's where the first, or the Sattvic, corresponding to our sun. This rules our moon. And it refers to our life so chosen as it is projected outward by our ego and seen by others. This refers to the god Hermanubis, who signifies the alchemical element of Mercury. Mercury refers to a passive principle. In many ways, Mercury is the prima materia, the rough stone that is used at the beginning of the great work. I'm going to pause there and just make a comment. So this is where, if you're doing some work on reflection and trying to align yourself better with your true will, trying to figure out what was my intent. Okay, I've been living, I've been doing whatever, I've been following plans and checking boxes and having fun, and now I'm ready to, or maybe I have been ready, but I'm now taking another step toward trying to discern in all that, what is it that my tendency is? What is the basic neutral tendency, the sattvic tendency that's through and trying to manifest unconsciously through my entire incarnation? So here we're talking about the rough stone. So we're talking about, you kind of looking at, okay, I've lived so many years, I've done this and that, I've enjoyed this, these are the things I like. Now this is my rough stone. This is my materia, my prima materia. This is that which now I have the opportunity as a magician, as an aspirant, to refine. In other words, to hone toward the will, to balance with the will. And as you'll see in the next and last section of the video, we're talking about, or we will be talking about, redemption. So there's going to be, we have three things. We have sun, moon, and elements, essentially. We have Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. And so these three things work together. He's going to talk about redemption in this piece. So the idea is that by the middle and the bottom getting together, son and daughter, of course, on the tree of life, the Ruach and Malkuth Yasad getting together, the disc and the or dagger and disc, those things together, marrying, can redeem, meaning can take the instinctual, animalistic energy without which life feels absolutely dead and meaningless. So that's the daughter principle. But taking that energy and putting it toward will. And so there's a way in which, by marrying sort of the mental part of ourselves, this middle part that we're now talking about, the Rajas, positive or masculine energy, with the feminine and the negative or the passive energy, which we haven't talked about yet, by marrying those two things together in ourselves, we can elevate the life so that the outer part of the rim is the wants are actually aligned with the will, that point around which all of this other stuff has been rotating. So to conclude the middle part of this, here says, so again we're talking about Rajas. It says, it represents the soul as it is ready to descend into a new incarnation, pure and without impressions, smooth as a newborn's brain. He's referring to the Mercury because the Mercury is the form, so everything that has form is has it in virtue of Mercury. So when we first take incarnation, we had already chosen a perfect form. It's a potential, but it's a form. It's like the blueprint of our incarnation. We could say it's our chart. as where what's represented in the chart. So the Mercury takes, is that of which the form is composed, and it takes incarnation, and it's perfect, and it's ready to work, to actually be a container or chalice for the will. The Rajas, or the middle coil, also refers to, he says, the path of the lovers, which contains the mysteries behind all mundane orders and is portrayed symbolically by the dagger. So you had Sattva, book of the law, neutral, purity, the highest, just to be. Second, you have the Rajas, positive, Mercury, dagger. And again, it's the lovers, which contains the mysteries behind all mundane orders. Mundane meaning those that tell you how to live as brothers, as siblings, as sisters on earth. Okay, those are the first two. Now the third, the lowest coil, is Tamas, Tamas, which is an energy often perceived as being negative, promoting inactivity, a death-like quality of inertia. Its sacred color is black. It is the heaviest, slowest, and dullest of all types of energy. Okay, and I'm going to skip ahead a bit, and then he says, this is Typhon. So again, on the third figure is Typhon on the Wheel of Fortune. Typhon signifies the element of salt, the alchemical salt. In numerous alchemical books, salt is also clearly associated with prima materia as well. But whereas Mercury symbolizes prima materia internally, so it's like its internal potential to be a vehicle of will, salt refers to its external qualities. What does it actually show up and look like outside, which can be mistaken, or it can be correctly recognized by you as the outside of that chalice, and understanding that it's supposed to be a vehicle for will. Salt is also referred to as a, quote, symbol for knowledge and wisdom, unquote, or sal sapientiae, the salt of wisdom. Sapientiae, sorry for my mispronunciation. Due to the nature of our body, salt is considered a neutral principle. This is the path of the man of earth, and I'll read this last part for those of you who may be considering taking Minerval initiation, or perhaps you have, in the Ordo Templi Orientis. He says, "O secret, O man, for herein lies the truth behind Baphomet, which is contained within the disc." So you had, again, Book of the Law, the dagger, and the disc. So the disc being the earth principle, the daughter principle, again, Tamas, or inertia. But again, without the disc, there is no joy in life. And that's what distinguishes Thelema from many of its predecessors that were old Aeonic type of philosophies or religions, which is that we don't reject the body, we don't reject the animalistic, we don't reject that in us which makes us one with the earth. However, we aren't just satisfied to do that. That would have been like what's condemned as paganism in the Bible, although we use the word differently today. When people that worship golden calves, let's say, worship the externals, we don't do that. We worship the external as a vessel or chalice for the will. So that's why this path, the Wheel of Fortune, connects Nitzak with Hesed. So in other words, and it's calf, it's the hand that grasps. So we're talking about the potential of the feminine part of ourselves, the disc, the daughter, Malkuth, the body, and Yesod as well, which is our more instinctual capacities, receptive, to be a vessel for the will, and that's what's called redemption. So for that to have a function and be joined with, one with the highest, that's what's called elevating the daughter to the throne of the mother. So the daughter is in Nitzak when it's on this journey, going from Malkuth to Nitzak, and then from Nitzak, it's elevated by the marriage with the son, or the Ruach, to Bina, the throne of Bina, if nothing else. In other words, whereas a Scarlet Woman is always going to be a daughter, if you will, of, or an avatar of Babylon. She cannot be Babylon because that's, she's a human, but nonetheless she can be an avatar, which means a manifestation or an incarnation of Babylon. But that can happen only when we take, or when she is joined with a proper true son who is completely at one with the Father, has no egotistical tendencies. I'm not getting into that in this video, but for the internal purposes, for thinking of the two sides of you, regardless of your gender or sexuality or sex, doesn't matter, that physical or instinctual part of you marrying with the mental or the soul, if you will, the middle regions of you, the dagger and the disc, in accordance with the law. So that's what makes possible the redemption of the daughter, which is just to say, living as a god upon earth, literally walking the earth as an avatar. That's the goal. And the thing is that as much as there are foolish things that people could do to try to rush this process, it's always a good idea to try to figure out your will and live accordingly. Like, there's never a bad thing, and you will be, your internal teacher will lead you at an appropriate pace if you but listen. Of course, listening sometimes is the hard part, and because there's so much we want to do, or our mind is worried, or it's very easy to get distracted from the simplicity of this. But nonetheless, this is the goal as Thelemites. So knowing that we have around the rim of our wheel, we have our manifested qualities. Internally, we have the intent behind those things manifesting as they do. And then above the abyss, we have our true will, our actual intent for taking it, and the unconscious manner in which we will be manifesting because we came here to fulfill a particular function. Let's talk about redemption, which is basically aligning all those three things, getting them to work in concert. So I'm going to read a couple more lines from Jerry's essay. He says, he's talking about the Sphinx. So again, remember, the Sphinx corresponds to Sattva, the highest coil of Kundalini. He says, finally, the Sphinx rules the fourfold elemental qualities of air, fire, water, and earth. The Sphinx, like Baphomet, in parentheses, disc of earth, so again, Baphomet here corresponds to the disc of earth, the daughter, holds the secrets behind the measure between heaven and earth. These forces rule our birth, life, and death. We cannot escape this cycle, nor rise above our true will. So the four qualities of the Sphinx, he goes on to say, correspond to the four magical virtues of to know, to will, to dare, and to keep silent. And so the keep silent he has underlined because he's going to focus on and emphasize the idea that your true will is nobody's business but your own. It's a mistake to talk about it. Why? So remember, first of all, the true will is, whenever you put it into words, it's never it, right? It's going to be just, it's helpful to have a formulation at any given time to be thinking about it or to feel it or simply to be acting upon it knowing that you're doing so. That's, all those things are good. To talk about it externally, to open up your mouth and talk about it, is to essentially take it and profane it, because it's something that exists above the abyss. It's something that therefore has no form of its own. It may have a preferred form that you could say is represented by Binah, and it comes down as a pure Mercury, and then you externalize it through what you manifest. But to keep silence, to actually keep your own counsel, is very important, because you don't want to profane your incarnation. You want to keep that sacred for yourself. I'm going to read just one little bit more here. To grasp something, and he's talking about kaf, the hand, which is the Hebrew letter corresponding to the Wheel of Fortune path from Nitzach to Hesed. He says, this letter symbolizes a grasping hand. To grasp something implies that we truly understand it, and if we understand it, we can utilize this information to greater fortune. In this light, what is finally grasped is the ability to properly read our birth chart like a treasure map. And again, you can generalize that. If you don't read astrology, that's not the end of the world by any means. That's nice to be able to do, but not everybody is into it or really has a capacity or desire to do it. But if you can read your life story as a treasure map, then, he says, in achieving this, we can obtain gold and thereby understand the truth as to why we picked our incarnation. I want to say just a few words about that. So, essentially, the more, when we first start out, I guess I should start there. When we first start out, inevitably everything's about me, I. Looking at, well, what did I do? What happened to me? And that's why we write our story. Fisharb, one version of which is basically telling your story as to how you came here as the spiritual aspirant that you are today, in light of every last thing that happened in your life. So the idea is that nothing is accidental. Every last thing that you experienced had a function. It is a reflection of your true will. And so by you going through each event and drawing the thread of will through that, you're essentially tying up all the loose ends and making it possible to not be haunted by anything that is not part of that. So just like with Kabbalah, in which we, at least if not earlier, we study when focusing into Hod, H-O-D, the eighth sphere and the tree of life, the reason that we work with Kabbalah, which is known as receiving, it's from the root of receiving in Hebrew, the reason we do that is to systematize all knowledge. We know that anything we can say, any statement that we can utter is not true. Now, there are certain things that are much more respectful to the facts or the evidence that we can gather. So we do want to act as scientists. We're into scientific illuminism. It isn't just random belief or blind faith. We do work with what we can document, which is why Grady used to always recommend that people make file folders for every year of their life and put every little scrap of fact. So, my first grade teacher was Mrs. Rogers or whatever it might be. Just anything at all. Just throw it in the folder for that year. And meanwhile, building up a dossier, if you will. So we want to take all those random little facts that seem meaningless sometimes by themselves, and many of them ultimately you might not put importance on, but nonetheless, to account for them all. There's definitely, you don't want to hide anything from yourself because it will come back to haunt you. So the reason that Fisharb corresponds to Hesed, or the exempt adept, in the old system of 10 grades, is that we want to basically take be able to view everything in our life that we've gone through and be at peace with it and understand its function, not for I or me, but for the whole. Because any time that something seems to be about me, I know that I'm deceived. Naturally, because of language, we're constantly reinforcing I. That's just the way it works in a social world, in an external world. But the adept, or the person, or at least the aspirant, is somebody who's progressively working toward accepting, that persona, accepting the traits, but also being able to undo the I. If you are to be a hermit in this lifetime, or whenever you may do it, if you will, you will eventually have to let go of I, so that the life story is no longer your life story. It's simply a vehicle. It's simply something that exists to channel the whole. It's just like a part of a body. It doesn't exist for itself. It doesn't have meaning in itself. It only has meaning in the greater whole. So when thinking about a hermit, let's say Aleister Crowley, there is some answer to the question. Of course, he only can know what that is, ultimately. When we have our guesses, we have our ideas, and he did write a lot about himself, so we have some clues. But the point being, each of us only knows our true will. Nobody else knows it. That true will is basically that function for which we came to hold. It's kind of like Atlas holding the world on his shoulders. Each of us, in principle, although maybe not in actuality, because you might have come here to do some particular foundational work that doesn't involve you becoming a hermit. So, this is a little theoretical, but let's just use the language. Everybody here has some function, some cosmic function that only you can do. But it's not about you. It's never going to refer to you or yours. It's not. It has nothing to do with you or yours. It has to do with the whole, channeling the aeon, channeling the current, which is universal. Well, I hope that this has been helpful. If you have questions, please ask them in the comment section, and I will address them either in writing or in another video. Thank you. 93. Love is the law, love under will.